Good evening. It's 6:31 p.m. Welcome to the Financial Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to start with a roll call of committee members. Susan Satori.
Here.
Scott Stocklin.
Here.
Rob Babcock.
Here.
Ken Picard.
Here.
John Rappa is here. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda, public comment. Any public comments? We have no one physically in the room.
No hands raised.
And there's one Zoom attendee, and there's no hand raised.
Okay, all right, so we'll move on from that. Second agenda item is approval of the meeting minutes. We have in our possession, you have in your possession, the January 14th meeting minutes. We do not have the January 30th. Motion to approve the January 14th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Moves. Since we do not have the January 30th meeting minutes, a motion to move them to the next meeting when we have a chance to receive them and review them.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, done. All right, good evening. Our first presentation tonight is the Community Preservation Commission. John, floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm John Campbell from the Community Preservation Committee. I'm joined by Lori Connors, my partner here. We wanted to present the articles, the applications that we approved to go forward to town meeting this year. And before I proceed, I handed out a chart, which is a little preview of what we of what we traditionally present at town meeting, and it's a pie chart of where our CPA money has gone since it was initiated in the town back in fiscal '06. And what you notice in the chart immediately is that the large majority of our CPA projects have gone toward open space and recreation, which is not a bad thing. One of the major initiatives for the creation of the Community Preservation Act was for the preservation of open space and reduce unintended development and so on. But the other two components are historical preservation and affordable housing creation. And by law, we must allocate at least 10% to each of those categories. But really the intent of the law and the statute was that you try to balance among the three wherever you can. We are underserving affordable housing by quite a bit, even though we try, and there have been some very successful projects, but the need is so great, and I think each year we like to keep emphasizing that where we can bring CPA to bear for more affordable housing in town, it's very important. So having said that, we're very pleased that this year the Housing Authority sponsored and did a great job preparing a project that will add 8 affordable housing units to the complex on Village Drive, and that half of these will be handicap access, and there'll be a preference for granting them to veterans in our community, in our local communities. The project requires about $1.1 million. The Housing Authority has $300,000 to contribute. The application asked for $800,000, but our committee agreed to add a 10% contingency, just as a provision. And as a reminder, unspent monies on a CPA project go back into the CPA unreserved account and are reconsidered in subsequent years. And then they hope to get a balance of the project costs from the state. And so it's a good partnership that we hope will bring much needed units to Northborough. So that's the big project from this year. It will consume a portion of our new revenue, as well as a portion of our unreserved savings, if you will. And then there was $279,000 in the affordable housing category balance, and that will be contributed as well. Again, a total of $880 was what our committee approved. That's kind of our real, one of our big projects for this year. Any questions on that initiative?
I do have one, actually. Just what is the definition of affordable housing?
It meets, and you're gonna stump me because I don't know the exact criteria, but you must meet a certain percentage of what is the median income. And,
Okay, so it's income-based,
Correct.
right, to be able to qualify for, okay.
It's based on the median household income, and it's dependent upon how many household members there are. And so it's less than 80% of whatever the median household income is for that household size.
Got it, okay. Okay,
State-based or
State-based.
in our state? Okay. Good.
thank you.
So, and it is particular to Worcester County. So Northborough, there are a few different ways that Worcester County is divided. And so there is a PMSA, so essentially it's a census tract that Northborough is grouped in with some of our neighboring communities.
Okay, so,
Divided into counties.
okay, so it's not the value of the house. And the reason I ask, I saw someone posting something the other day about an affordable property in Northborough that was, I think it was like $250,000. And I don't know whether that's a lot or a little, but so there's not a component of that where they look at the average home value and it has to be below.
So what they
30,
look at
40%.
is, they look at the affordability for median income families.
Okay,
And so that's how they base the price. So I believe they assume a household size of maybe four, like this is a 3-bedroom home. So they assume, I believe, a four household,
Yeah.
4-person household. And that's how they come up with the maximum value that the house can be sold for.
okay,
And it also varies depending upon whether they are aiming for low income or moderate income. So Habitat for Humanity is typically either very low income or low income. And this is a Habitat for Humanity house.
got it, okay. All right, that's helpful, thank you.
John, how'd your committee get to these numbers? What was the process?
Excuse me, the number for this particular application?
Yeah.
I think I can answer your question by saying the application was presented to us asking for 800,000. And we tend as a committee to take all the projects as a group and look at affordability as one of our criteria, meaning do we have the resources in new revenue and/or the reserve accounts to afford it? If it was a project of great importance and it was beyond our budget, we might look to present the idea of borrowing, which is what we happened to do last for White Cliffs. And we pay that each year. It's going to come up later in our presentation. We pay that each year from new CPA revenue toward the bond payment. Otherwise, we're looking at, does it look like we have the resources and reserves to afford this? And that's what we did in this project and kind of gave it priority. There were not a lot of other expensive applications this year, so it made it easy to, bring it forward and kind of make it our priority. Is that what you're asking?
A little bit. So this is $1.1 million for 8 units. And how did you get to estimating that price, I guess, is what I'm looking for. Did you go out to bid on this? Do you have an idea in hand that it will cost $1.1 million or less? And obviously, our contribution is going to be the 880, but how'd you get to the gross number, is where I'm asking.
So it's important to note that our committee did not do the research in this case to arrive at the budget. It was presented to us by the applicant, which was the Housing Authority. And they had excellent research in the application as to the cost of the units. They've actually based it on a modular construction process where each unit is essentially prefab. This is very common now in apartment building. And by doing it that way, they have a known budget, less chance of overrides, not the right word, over expenditures, and so on. So to be honest, we were presented with what was a really great set of data, and we didn't question that they got to it. And more importantly, they felt like they had secured support from the state, whereas if you remember a few years ago, you might remember we tried to bring forward a project for affordable housing units. A budget had been arrived at, initially had been determined by the state to be qualified and be matching, and then at the last minute, they said, your numbers are way off.
Right.
You know, you're way too low, it's not gonna work, and there was not enough time to recover from that, and so we passed over it at town meeting.
I do recall. So the
this one was
Housing
much better
Authority,
prepared.
the Housing Authority vetted this with the State Housing and Livable Community, Livable Communities Committee?
Correct.
Right, okay.
New acronym from them, right?
Yeah.
ELHLC.
So these 8 units are what I'll call turnkey, that when it's done, it's move-in, the mechanicals are there, the plumbing, the electrical, it's painted, it's move-in condition, that's what I call turnkey, yes?
That's the intent, yes.
Okay, all right. Any other questions?
Yeah, through the chair, what is our affordable percentage right now in the town?
It's, well, if you look at the subsidized housing inventory, it's
The official number, what is the percentage?
10.28%. So
10.2?
if we fall under 10%, then we are subject to possibly getting Chapter
40Bs.
40B proposals.
Very aware of that.
Yeah.
All right, so these are apartments. Are they all going to be affordable, or,
Yes, and they're for veterans.
no, I
So
understand
the
that, but
four-
if,
4 units on the first floor are going to be ADA accessible.
so my understanding of the 40B process, if you have a rental housing unit, and if you earmark 10% affordable, all of the units are considered affordable.
This is a housing authority property, so all of the units are affordable.
Okay.
Looks like you're going to put a good dent in the affordable housing for a change.
Yes, yep. I'm pleased to see that, and we need to continue to promote that. I
Yeah,
mean, it's-
looks good.
And John, on Village Drive, the lot where this is going to land, is it towards the back? So if I'm standing in the library parking lot, it's towards the back end, yes?
I actually have a map,
Good.
so I can show you. Unfortunately, I don't have multiple copies, so.
Pass that around.
This is the proposed structure. So these are existing, so they're gonna tuck it in the back there.
Where's the, which building is the library?
The library is,
Pass this the opposite way. This is from the applicant,
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Can we have a copy of that for our file?
Sure, we
For the- For the,
get a copy for you.
we should have one, right, for the,
Go put it on the copier.
That'd be great.
Seek and you shall find.
this also.
All right, good, good, all right.
Look like nice units.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks to be well-planned.
And is there a specific vendor or vendors that do this? Do you know?
Yes, there are, and I don't know its name
Hmm.
off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm looking to see, you know, that there's another drawing in here. Just bear with me for a minute.
So is this contingent on the matching grant from the state? The 300,000 or so?
Yes, the project is not asking the town or CPA to supplement if they don't get it. So I guess to answer your question, it's fair to say, should they fail to get that commitment that they believe they have, then I would postpone it.
Okay.
My interpretation, it's a $2 million project, so the balance,
Correct.
it's not going to happen if,
Yeah, not based
the
on
state
what
monies
we're bringing to
don't
town
come in,
meeting.
yeah.
Right, right. We're not on, we're not obligated to pick up the balance.
so the town's $1.1 million, state's the
The
balance,
difference, yeah.
900.
Correct.
If we went to town meeting and we gained approval, and then all of a sudden the state said no, and then they came back again at some point in time, would we have to revote this if the number did not change?
I guess technically, yes. I think that if town meeting grants, if town meeting approves an application using CPA, we tend to give a time, a considerable time limit. Not sure if it's 1 or 2 years, but, there would be a delay in the implementation of it, and we would not rescind that award, unless for good reason it wasn't going to happen. In which case, here again, the 880 would go back to the unreserved balance, which means it's not formally committed to affordable housing any longer, but would be available for it at the next town meeting.
Thank you.
So the vendor that supplied the plan, so this was included in their application, was Integrity Modular Design and Construction.
Okay.
Now, I probably they won't be necessarily going with this vendor because they'd have to go out to bid.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, good. John, next article?
Very good, thank you. The next application we approved was to put $200,000 in the conservation fund. We've used this tool repeatedly, and town meeting has approved each time, and it's gone toward preserving major open space areas, including the Green Street property, the former Shunderland, various other connected properties to conservation land in the Mount Pisgah and other trail areas. And most recently, it was the main mechanism for affording the Whitney Street property that was approved at last town meeting. But we did use the majority of the balance of the conservation fund. And so this would start us back with another $200,000. We expect also a contribution from the state going toward that Whitney Street property that would add another $200,000. So we get our conservation fund back to $400,000 if both of those mechanisms took place. And this is requested by the Open Space Committee, who believes that continuing to think about building that reserve is very helpful when another opportunity to acquire open space occurs. So it's, again, been a very effective mechanism. By having it in the conservation fund, we can act more quickly without waiting a full year's town meeting cycle. It seems that the voters have supported that consistently.
I have to say, your purchase of Green Street really helped keep the feel that's been there for many, many years. So it's nice to drive by and see that.
Yeah, I
intact.
totally agree. It's one of the prettiest rides in town.
It is, if you go slow enough.
And, yeah, it was, it was good collaboration at the time, and
Yeah,
we keep looking for that kind of opportunity again.
I hope some more shows up for you.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Is that down at the bottom of Green Street?
Correct.
It's very nice. We take our dog there.
When you take the
Yeah.
bend in the road, and
Yeah, yeah.
whether you're coming from above or below, you see the meadow outside. I don't know if it's a formal arrangement of who cuts the hay now, but it happens consistently enough that it never appears overgrown.
No,
And, there's a trail across it and up into the hill to the side. And you can continue along that into the Rostron property, which was also partially purchased by Conservation Fund money in the past, and a large portion of it they donated, but it's a good trail walk if you're
yep.
interested.
That family was very generous.
Yes, they were.
Good. All right. Any other questions? No? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, the next big project, what I expect to be a big part of our presentation, is White Cliff's design application. And this was prepared by Lori. And the application itself is for $93,940, and it is for the engineering and architectural design study for how to remove the additions to the White Cliffs property, the non-historic additions, if you will, the large kitchens and so on, which from the beginning of the analysis of White Cliffs and what its future uses might be, the recommendation has always been, you most likely should remove those additions, unless somebody at that time had bought the property and wanted to get the kitchen going again. That didn't happen. So right now, they're providing a detriment to the building. It's too hard to maintain those spaces and keep them from contributing to the degradation of the main property. So the plan is to remove them, and we need to first study how to do it, what it's going to cost. And so it is, however, anticipated that this is phase one of a two-phase project. And although the application is only for the 93,000, we expect to present at town meeting that it is expected to be the first phase, and that the second phase will have an approximate cost of perhaps up to $700,000. While the purpose of the first phase is to learn from the engineering study what the true cost would be and prepare to go out to bid, we feel it's important to tell the voters that this is the next step of activity to preserve White Cliffs, and that it'll be necessary to do the first phase to get to the second phase. And we also want to promote that there's still a lot at play for what might happen with White Cliffs. There's a lot of opportunities being explored. But regardless, we feel that this needs to be done to prepare the building, whether the town keeps it, or whether it happens to be sold, or whether it happens to be repurposed. Eventually, this work needs to be done to prepare the historic structure for further preservation. And more importantly, we'll be putting forth that the town purchased White Cliffs with CPA money, and it can contribute to the preservation with CPA money. So when we look at the revenue we bring in each year, I kind of glossed over that, but we're working with $840,000 projected new revenue for fiscal '26. And also, the state has been matching historically on average plus 30% each year. We have that revenue to deal with each year, in addition to other reserves that we keep in that unreserved fund. So we're able to use that creatively, and I think it's important to tell the voters that, that makes it more affordable, rather than worrying about the next big thing that the town has to spend for.
So you're saying that you're hoping that if we're able to get this design money, that next year the CPC would come forward using your own funds again to do whatever it is that number looks like?
That's what we anticipate,
Okay.
yes.
So no demo in the next fiscal year,
Correct,
unless there's something catastrophic that happens.
correct. Correct. It's important to note, CPA funds cannot pay for maintenance. Once you own a building, if you will, you've got to maintain it. But in this case, the removal of the old additions and the preparation and protection of the building contributes to its restoration. So that's really how it qualifies under CPA.
The 840,000 of new revenues, what's the 840 number? Where's that come from?
It's the projected new revenue of the tax surcharge, the 1.5% surcharge on property tax here in
Okay.
town.
Including the state
And the
match as well.
matching, or the not matching, but funds.
Right, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Personally, right now, it is a town asset, capital asset, and we should do our best to make sure all safety measures are being taken and that it is being preserved properly at the moment. So I think it's a good, solid plan you've got going.
Thank you.
Okay, next, all right, John?
I'm just going to skip ahead in the memo because it's going to be quick, but each year we need to present the next payment on the bond that bought White Cliffs. And this year it'll be the 8th payment out of what are expected to be 10, and it's $166,575. So that'll be, I think, in the warrant lineup, it'll be right after the White Cliffs design. Otherwise, we were presented an application by the Historic District Commission to put a new monument honoring those citizens of Northborough that participated in the Revolutionary War. It's relatively inexpensive project, $10,758. They have a design for the monument, preliminary, and their plan is to propose that it be put into the current memorial area to the right of the town common, if you will, where we have some existing monuments and, tend to conduct ceremonies during Veterans Day and so on. So it looked like a very good use of CPA money for historic.
John, have they mocked up what that might look like yet?
I I knew you were gonna ask that.
Should have had more handouts.
So, this is where they're proposing to put the monument, and it's, I've got another picture, actually, if you wanna slide that down.
I'll get it.
That shows the
Oh, yeah.
sign.
When it makes it to me, I'll make a copy of it. And I promise not to slam the door this time.
It's okay if you do.
I'll remind our committee that typically we opine on capital projects of 25,000 and above.
So it's gonna look very similar to the Veterans
Yep,
Memorial.
okay, thank you.
Thanks. My comment is, it's very exciting to be able to have something like this as part of the celebration, so,
That's right.
very, very exciting.
Big year next year, right?
Do they have any estimate that, once this is, if this is approved, how fast that would be basically cut and implemented?
You have to wait till July 1st.
Right.
But the plan is to dedicate it during that year, the anniversary
Right.
year. But they didn't specify in the application exactly when that'd be.
Okay,
Hopefully not in the winter.
yeah.
I think this is what's my favorite part of why this committee has existed for so many years, that you do big expansive projects, and then something like this, that it would be hard to find in budgets that we're working with right now, the monies for it, so.
It's ironic that you mentioned that. Do you remember what the very first CPA application was, proposed by your husband?
Oh, gosh, it probably had something to do with soccer.
It was the illumination of the flag at the Ellsworth McAfee.
Okay, that's this other thing, okay.
It's, very low budget, but wisdom at the time was, let's bring something to the town that, is easy to afford and do. Because we were just sort of figuring out, what are we gonna do with the money now?
Yeah.
It's the first year. I always remember that, it was good advice.
Sometimes the small ones are the best ones.
Good flag
Kelly
etiquette.
spoke of them.
Yeah. John, you got one last item here, I see.
That's about it. We always present each year to add money to the CPA Administrative Fund. By law, we can apply for up to 5% of new revenue and apply it to the administrative account. It's used for appraisals and things. It's used for support of applications to the committee. It's used to pay for the committee's business. We pay coalition dues and things like that. And if it's not used, it goes back into the unreserved balance.
So you use some of that for 432 Whitney Street, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
And if all those are voted in, as we hope, at town meeting, the unreserved fund balance would show 317,000, so still a little bit of savings, if you will. And that would be added to by the state match again, when it comes in, right?
Right, when this,
How does it actually get accounted for?
so the 840 that you discussed for FY '26 is estimated revenues. For FY '25, that figure was 820. So whatever we collect for revenue beyond 820 will become part of that unreserved fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So it's similar to, there's no formal process where it's certified by the state, but once the books are closed and we send in our free cash numbers, that's when we officially have the available balance in the CPA fund to spend.
Okay, all right.
And from your own chart, I should correct the answer to Robert's question. The estimated net levy from the tax surcharge is 708,000. And the estimated state match is 132,000. That's where we got the 840.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Good, great. John, anything else?
No, thanks for
Thank
your
you,
support.
thank you very much. Lori, you're up.
All right. So I'm here to talk to you about a very exciting project that has been underway since early fall. We hired the Beta Group using $250,000 of ARPA funds appropriated by the Select Board to design a streetscape project that focuses on Blake Street and the portion of Pierce Street that extends from the intersection with Blake to what I call the War Memorial Park. So this project includes the Pocket Park at the intersection of Blake and Route 20, as well as the landscaped area, not where the monuments are, but the landscaped area and the associated municipal parking lot at the War Memorial Park. So we put together a focus group who's been working diligently with the consultant to guide the planning process. And we are now ready. Unfortunately, I don't have a concept plan with me this evening because we just discussed it at the meeting right before this one. So it wasn't ready for prime time for tonight, but it will be ready for prime time at this community outreach workshop, which is scheduled for February 26th at 6:30 p.m. at the library. We're excited to show our preliminary ideas and receive feedback from all of you. We did send these flyers to all property owners within a quarter mile of the 4 West Main Street, and we will be doing an email blast and, advertising as much as we possibly can think of between now and then to get people out to the meeting. So we do have a very, very rough preliminary estimate. So of course, we're only at about the 25% design stage. So it's difficult to come up with an accurate estimate at this point. But I anticipate that the total project cost will be about $2.1 million. So that would include construction oversight by the engineering firm, Beta Group, as well as the site work. At this evening's focus group meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion about burying the utilities. So there are 3 telephone poles on Blake Street. So you would think that that would be very expensive. However, it could be upwards of $1 million to bury those utilities. So we've been going back and forth for a couple of months on what to do. And we decided that would be something that should be best discussed at the community outreach workshop. They did want me to bring it up to you folks tonight to hear your thoughts. So it would add probably $1 million to the price tag. So instead of being $2.1 million, it would be $3.1 million, could possibly be even more than that. One of the ideas that was floated tonight is maybe doing 2 separate articles. So there would be one article for the basic design, and then a second article exclusively for the engineering and construction cost associated with burying the utilities. There would also be a cost to the individual property owners along Blake Street, because if we bury the utilities, then they'll have to connect, new service connections. So that would be a burden for the property owners, and that should be important consideration. So in addition to the flyer, I did provide you with some information about the project scope, as well as the benefits that we anticipate. Just so that you know, what we're looking at is park improvements. So that would be new landscaping. We would maintain the Christmas tree, the beloved Christmas tree, and as many of the trees that are healthy in the parks to retain. We were talking about possibly a pergola, new seating areas. There'd be sidewalks on both sides of the street. Concrete sidewalks with 6-inch vertical granite curb. We are talking about doing some on-street parking on Blake Street to alleviate some of the pressure on our parking areas in town. We are talking about decorative streetlight with banner hardware embedded into it. New street trees. Right now, our municipal parking lot doesn't have any drainage facilities. We're proposing to reconfigure that parking lot and add drainage. So there are some great improvements that are proposed that would really improve the character of the area. As you can see from the photos, it's kind of a sea of asphalt today. So the idea is to add in a lot more landscaping to make it more hospitable, more a place where people will want to be. And the property owner, 1014 Blake Street, she has a representative who sits on the focus group. And they were so excited about the project that they also want to make improvements to their parking lot. So we've been working with their engineer. They hired an engineer to combine the two designs together and come up with a cohesive design, which you will see for the first time on the 26th.
So are you thinking this is going to be more open space? Or are you building, and like, what about, are the buildings that are there, do they stay, or?
So we have no control over private property. So we cannot dictate what happens to those buildings unless the town wants to buy those properties. So the only control that we have is over the public right-of-way for both Blake and Pierce Streets, as well as those two municipal parking lots and the two parks. So those are really where we're concentrating our efforts. And certainly we hope, and you know, what I've seen, I've been involved in another downtown revitalization project. And typically when there's improvements made to the public realm, then it inspires spin-off improvements. So the private property owners decide, oh, hey, if they're investing in the streetscape, then I'm going to invest in my building. And that's what we're hoping that will happen here.
Okay. So the buildings that are on here, even though they're in the brown zone as it's drawn here, those are private?
They are.
The dog place, and I think it's a restaurant that's there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So those, certainly, the property owner has expressed the desire that those would remain. The restaurant, they are interested in doing outdoor seating, so we have discussed that as part of their design.
Which utilities are impacted by what's on those poles?
So pretty much all of the electricity for all the buildings. The 4 West Main Street already has underground utilities, so that's great. But all of the other buildings on Blake Street, except for 31 Blake gets its power from Pierce Street, not Blake Street. But the other ones, and including Fatouche, gets their power off of one of those telephone poles. There's a single telephone pole in front of their
I'm saying
building.
vendors, National Grid,
Oh, okay.
Verizon, Charter, who else?
That's pretty much all we're aware of. So National Grid, so just the design would be about $52,000. So that was the price that we were quoted. Verizon's cost is about $2,000 and National Grid is $50,000. That's just to do the design to come up with a solid cost estimate for what the work would cost.
So if that were to move ahead, who does the trenching? The town, all three of those? Who gets to pick who digs the ditch?
Well, of course, to a certain extent, National Grid dictates who does what. So our design firm, Beta Group, has done a lot of downtown streetscape projects, and we were just talking about this at our focus group meeting before this one. So there is a certain percentage of the work, so the undergrounding work would be done by the contractor that we hire, And then National Grid steps in and they take over. So when I'm talking about the undergrounding work, I'm talking about installation of the conduit, and then National Grid would do the particulars, they pull the lines and whatnot.
And they'd have to certainly trench into the houses and buildings on that street also. So it's a big undertaking.
It's a big undertaking, and of course, we can't use public funds to pay for private
Understand?
projects, so we wouldn't be able to fund the services to
Right.
the individual property owners, so that would be a cost that they would have to bear.
In my experience dealing with guys like National Grid is they move at glacial speed. So
Yes,
that's going to be a gating factor. If that's your critical path, you're going to have to sit there and wait until they show up.
Yes, and I am a bit concerned because I really am hoping, we've been putting all our ducks in a row to go out to bid in January of next year, anticipating a start of April, mid-April, weather permitting. And it'll take approximately 9 months to construct. So I anticipate that'll bring us to December of '26.
Not including the power situation, the pole situation.
That
Right.
does not include the undergrounding.
Seems like with the environmental impact, $1 million plus the impact to the buildings around there and the time factor, you know, if you had an extra $1 million, you could use that for someplace else as opposed to, okay, the poles are there, they're all over town, live with it, you know. Do what they did in Shrewsbury. They wrapped them in, passed it the other day, what'd they call it? Almost looks like neckties or scarves, but anyway, I digress. It seems like for the bang for the buck, for $1 million and change and some unknown factors and the impact on people on there, in my opinion, is like, you know,
So how many buildings, private property, would be impacted with the service change?
So, of course, 4 West Main does get its power, so it comes down a telephone pole and then it goes over to 4 West Main. So it would technically be impacted. So there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 buildings.
yeah.
So you'd have 6 buildings that would have to have private trenching.
Actually, I'm not sure, the doggy den might get its power on Pierce Street. I'm not sure.
Do we have a sense what that's gonna cost those businesses to connect? Ballpark even?
Of course, we had that conversation this evening, and they said, you know, actually, I probably shouldn't say it out loud, because they were not comfortable with the figure, and I know that this is
That's fine. Yeah.
televised, so I don't want to upset people
No, it's fine.
when I'm not confident with the dollar figure.
May I just ask, when you say they, consultants that you have there, or people
Yes, the
here in
Beta
town?
Group.
Okay. When I look at the picture of the area, I don't think that the wires are glaring. I don't. I think that for what I'm hearing about all of the extra cost, all the time and effort that's gonna be put in, having a hard time now selling property owners that are gonna have to put out more money in times when lots of businesses are struggling to make a profit and do well. That, I don't see the need for it. I do see this brown area, and I am very excited to see that you're going to put a pretty new face on it. And I do believe that you will start to pull in. A case in point, you just drive down Church Street now and you see the old fire station going down and the house next to it gone. And it looks wonderful just to see that open space and to understand what can be put there and make everything special. I think you will do a great job with this. I don't think the wires are as important as some people probably think, but I understand everybody would like to get it all done at the same time.
Okay. Anybody else? Scott, Rob? John? Good. No? Okay. Lori, anything else?
No,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Good. Well, let us think about this, and we may come back to you with, respectively, with some more questions. But thank you both tonight for joining us.
Lori, I hope you do get this project, because I'd be excited to see some of the work that you could actually do with a larger project like this, because you've done some really great things for the town so far. So
Oh,
I'd like
thank
to
you.
see you get something of this scale, so.
Thank you. I'm excited, and, this is phase one of a multi-phase project, so of course, this is kind of the trial. And if it goes well and people embrace it and they're excited, then hopefully we can transform, unfortunately, the side streets, not Route 20, but that should make a big difference, I think.
Thank you.
Great for Apple Fest 27
And other things to come,
and
sure.
other things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the timing is also very good because, as you know, 4 West Main is mostly empty. So the idea is to demolish and redo that parking lot while it's not in demand. And then it'll be all ready and beautiful for
Yeah.
the next phase of 4 West Main.
Kind of minimum disruption, but yeah. Good. Very good. Thank you again.
nice plan.
Thank you.
All right. Jason, updated capital budget.
Oh, yeah, sure, thank you. Can I, I have before you an updated draft CIP involving some changes in some of the numbers that we've looked at before. Nothing drastically has happened, but the cover page of this is a graph we typically produce showing the funding sources of the CIP and what was isolated for FY '26 and sources that we expect the potential money, should all of these articles be approved, the funding sources that they would come from potentially. So what we're seeing is that the green sliver or quarter of the pie is borrowing because the town's current resources that it has available, free cash, isn't sufficient to fund all of these articles. So should we want to fund every item in this, it would involve incurring debt in order to do so.
To be clear, this is above and beyond any financing for the fire station project. Yes?
Correct, yeah, this is just solely for the FY '26 capital plan,
Okay.
which the taxpayer impacts that we've looked at in the past already have the fire station numbers factored into them. So this would just be for the plan that we've been looking at from the beginning of the cycle this year. So I didn't identify which items in here would be subject to a debt authorization vote. I simply totaled them up and then identified the shortfall on the next page. If you look at the next page, that's just the data that's driving the graph.
I presume when we start drafting our report, like we've done in the past, we'll identify sources of funds for each of these articles, what's free cash, what's from reserves, what's from debt, et cetera.
Right, and I think, as we get through the process, we'll identify which items in the capital plan are best suited being funded with debt rather than free cash. Last year, again, we had a similar circumstance where it was the fire pumper truck that was funded with debt because it was the largest single item in
Right.
the capital plan. I don't want to reach too far back, but over the summer, there was the financial summit where we did financial projections and looked at our debt policy. And that debt policy calculation, to say that we could comply with it, it would be accurate to say that we could fund this debt and stay compliant with our own internal policy for debt. Whether that's determined to be affordable by taxpayers, that's another question. But on the debt policy that this body was responsible for helping craft years and years ago, that is part of the town's financial policies that have helped it maintain a strong bond rating and achieve in prior years, the GFOA budget award and so forth, having these financial policies. It has, it complies with that if we were to do so.
So we're looking at over 8 million in capital projects, roughly?
For this year, I think we have a $6.6 million of projects. But to people watching at home, only approximately 5 million of that total would be funded from the general fund, either via free cash or a debt authorization.
This is really page 2, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking page 2.
Yeah, so
Page
page
6
one,
and a half.
if you were to add all of these sources up, it would be the 6.6 million that's shown on the next page.
In the way you've allocated it, it's 550 tied towards an ambulance for borrowing to make up the shortfall.
Correct.
Just
Well-
as a way to look at it.
That's typically how we've funded ambulances every year in the past. It's paid from the ambulance revolving fund, so the claims and the payments that go to the ambulance fund pay for the ambulances. So we would authorize that as debt, the $550,000 that's proposed for the ambulance. It would be a debt authorization, but the debt service would be funded from the ambulance fund. So that's why it's backed out into a separate column on this second page.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did we get the correct numbers back from the school? There seemed to be a discrepancy on a couple of their projects. Was it the Z School roof?
Well, yeah, there was one item that had been in the capital plan where there was $3.7 million for the Z School roof for next year, for 27, in the plan, and then they were discussing the need to have $100,000 appropriated this year so that it could stay in the pipeline for the MSBA rapid repair
Okay, so
program.
that is the definite number.
So, yeah, if you look at these numbers here, I've edited them to include the $100,000. It's the last item under the school's K through
Yep.
8 toward the bottom of the
I
page.
see that, yes.
So that's where the $100,000 came from. There is they discussed a project where they hadn't assigned a cost to it, so that's not included here. So have not heard back yet with a price for that. That was for security cameras at one of the schools. Other than that, I think that their numbers are the same as what they presented that night. And again, we're waiting for that number to crystallize, I guess,
Okay.
with the school's
All right.
security. Yeah, and then there were some changes to some of the public works projects that were in here. That notably, I think that there's some that were moved out of the facilities plan because they were handling them with some in-house and being from the existing article that we have for the town hall. Okay. And again, I would highlight your attention on the planning downtown revitalization. That number was 2.5 million. That was in the plan before. It's since been revised to $2.1 million, and the funding sources are anticipated to be 1.85 from local resources, and then $250,000 is anticipated to come from a grant.
What does local resources mean?
Being either a borrowing authorization or free cash.
Okay. Susan?
Do you think this year we will have a more robust discussion about prioritizing some of these in case we feel we should not borrow for a portion of them?
Well,
Are we-
yeah, that's part of the discussion.
Okay.
I believe it should be.
All right.
So, Susan, do you mean something different than, for example, last year, in our report, we have each of the articles that we vote to recommend or not recommend to the select board and town meeting to adopt, and there's a priority on there of 1, 2, 3, 4. Are you talking about that or something different?
Something different. If we decide that we think that we shouldn't borrow as much, and we put in the plan X amount of dollars we don't think we should borrow for, or we shouldn't borrow for any of it. we
Isn't
would
that
have-
isn't that what we do in this whole process, though, is we're listening and saying how we're gonna allocate monies?
It-
Isn't that what we do every meeting, more or less?
It usually comes before us with it all, I mean, we can vote against whatever has been brought forward, yeah, but I didn't know if maybe we would have a more robust conversation ourselves of what we saw after hearing from each department. What we saw as the priority, not because it's in our priority ratings for need. Because we understand everything is needed.
Right.
And needed in a different way due to useful life, whatever it might be in there. But, or to replacement, they're all different priorities. But it's that somebody, it's like with your family budget, somebody has to make a decision when all of a sudden you have $100 to spend and somebody wants $110. You got to decide which kid isn't getting the $10,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea, because I recall too, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but our 1 to 5 rating was kind of priority, but not really. Like,
Categorizing.
Categorizing.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Categorizing, it wasn't prioritizing.
exactly. And I think what you're saying is like, we should look at it maybe with a different lens slightly in terms of like, well, should we really be spending money on this? Like, what's our feeling about it?
Yeah.
So I think it's a good idea. Because honestly, look, I mean, we live here in town, we've got friends in town, and the first thing that people say to you when they find out that you're on the finance committee is like, oh my God, my taxes went up 12%. What are you guys doing? You know, and so, yeah, it would be good to, I think, do something like that.
So, Jason, when do we need to get a draft report for our committee to start to digest?
Well, I think March 24th would be the target date to have finalized the recommendations and votes. That's the
So we
date
want
of
to
the
back
joint.
in, we want to back into that.
Correct, yeah. So that's the joint hearing with the select board and and appropriations on the budget. So, in the end, there will be a report that this committee produces, and it will, you'll be asked for a recommendation from the moderator on each one of these articles. And if the approach is gonna be, whether or not to incur debt, you could use that as a tool. The priorities that you're talking about, you use that as a tool as to which ones you want to recommend, and you may not want to recommend the debt incurring articles or so forth. But that would be up to the committee to decide make those decisions around their value rating.
So I think to start with, if I may, the committee needs to talk about, do we want to incur debt, right? Or do we support incurring debt, or do we not support incurring debt? And that would help us prioritize which articles move forward, because like you said, every department has said, these are vital, we need to move forward, we need these things, but we need to have some fiscal restraint to say, okay, everybody needs, but which ones are more important than others?
Right, and
And
what-
help guide that
Right,
conversation.
and what flows into cash flow management, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But to Scott's point, if you have neighbors saying something about the tax rate, the ultimate decision is determined by the taxpayer. They vote at the town meeting.
100%.
They're the ones who determine what gets spent and what doesn't get spent.
Right.
So I have people saying that to me, did you attend the town meeting?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, because we don't control it, right? I mean, we're an advisory board, right? We can feel whatever we feel, but at the end of the day, it's going to get voted on at the town.
The ultimate authority is the town meeting.
Sure.
Not the selectmen, not the appropriations committee, not us. It's the people who attend the meeting, who vote. They make all the decisions on how the money's gonna get spent.
Yep.
I will remind you that 2 years ago at town meeting, both appropriations in this committee recommended to the select board that they use ARPA funds for the fire engine and the tight tank. It was like $1.7 million, I think, collectively, and they chose to finance those with debt. So that was, even though 17 people said, we strongly feel you should do this, they voted to do something different.
Yeah, yeah.
I, um, I, um, I, 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 I watched the appropriations meeting, and there was some very serious talk about sharpening the pencils and really trying to bring things in at 3%. I think they're going to really mark up the budget this year. I think we should try to take that same kind of motivation when we look. We're coming very close to an override time. When an override happens, it's not a pretty thing if it doesn't pass. And it will get to go to a ballot vote, and it will be out of all of our hands. And if we don't manage ourselves in a way and appear that we are managing ourselves in a way that we're being as cost-effective and as conservative as possible to not go over that ledge, I think we will do a lot better. We will hopefully earn some trust from the taxpayer.
I mean, these two presentations tonight, this is the lion's share of the capital requests. So there's a lot of weight right here on these 2-3 projects.
The CPC are from surcharges.
Yeah.
And until somebody decides to not do that anymore, the surcharges are there.
Right. Okay. Jason, anything else?
That's it. That concludes my
Okay.
section.
Next meeting date. So February 25th, we have Scott Charpentier, DPW Director, talking about the DPW water and sewer enterprise capital projects.
Yeah.
And then March 11th is the police and fire chiefs.
I would expect the Public Works, speaking about facilities and the enterprise funds, to be a fairly lengthy discussion. I mean, this, you said this on a percentage basis, the hearing from CPC and the planning director, that's a high dollar value, but for a very small number of articles. There's going to be a much longer list of items.
They have a
under
lot
the
of moving
Public
parts,
Works.
literally and figuratively, yeah.
I think we are going to need at least one meeting to have this discussion of setting priorities.
Agreed.
John, I saw an email about another financial summit.
Yeah, so February 27th is going to be an economic development focused meeting, and it's going to be a joint meeting with the Select Board and Appropriations, and that's February 27th. And I'll add that to your agenda.
Right, and I believe they're trying to do that at the library, approximately 6:30 PM that night.
Is this for something that's going to be brought forward at town meeting?
I don't know. And Stephanie, do you have any color?
I thought it was educational, was my interpretation.
It is,
That's my
it is
understanding.
educational, yeah.
Is there any reason we're doing it right now in the middle of the fundamental budget and all of the two primary, finance committees that have to meet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Good.
we need to be educated.
Well, what was the meeting that we saw circulated about taxes for
That's what
business?
the 27th, that's this Feb. 27 meeting, Scott.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The town of Marlboro, their economic development person is going to come in and make presentations and just show different ways to bring business in and how, for instance, even TIFs work to generate revenue in the future. And also, Kevin Costner, it's Kevin Caros, okay. He's coming in as well. He's from the Mass Office of Business Development, and he's very intelligent on economic development and businesses. So I think it will be a great tool for all of the financial bodies to come together. And it should be short and sweet, but it'll give us hands-on examples of what we can do to bring people in for West.
It's just a
Whatever else.
terrible timeline for trying to get
It
the
is,
budgets.
it is.
If it could have happened after town meeting, or at least until the warrants were closed and the reports were written, would
Yeah.
have been so much better.
I'm working on something, so.
Okay, all right,
Something's a
right.
brewing, yes,
all right.
yes.
Let us know when you're serving the coffee.
Okay.
So we need to get a first draft of our report shortly after we talk to the chiefs on the 11th. So,
Yeah, so maybe I'll add that to your upcoming agenda, saying, to be determined, meetings surrounding finalizing report and recommendations.
Are you starting to try to do Tuesdays and Thursdays with appropriations and financial planning? Are you gonna start doing 2 a week at some point?
Well, this week,
No?
I'm starting to this
Yeah,
week,
yeah,
but
okay.
that's not the hope is to not have that.
Okay. All right.
But again, a major difference between where we are this year and last year. I think we're starting these meetings around the same time, or a little bit earlier this year. But the appropriations had heard from almost every single department. I think there was maybe one of the town departments that it hadn't heard from. And they're gonna focus on the bigger departments this year. And so that might help us schedule some of these meetings,
All right.
fewer meetings anyway.
okay.
Are we back to our 6 o'clock time?
Yeah, and again, thanks for the flexibility of starting at 6:30 tonight, but it was really driven by the planners of town, the plan director's availability because of the focus group that
Okay.
was leading up to this.
So anything else, Jason,
No.
Stephanie?
Nope.
Okay. Any other business? Susan, you had mentioned something at the last meeting about what costs has the town incurred for maintaining the capital projects we have that aren't municipal buildings such as 4 West Main and the White Cliffs. I think it's appropriate when Scott Charpentier comes in, I'm sure he'll give us some color on that, and maybe we'll bring it to the table at that time.
I raised the issue, yes, and Steph was nice enough to send out some memos that she had of some of those kinds of expenses. And I had a conversation with her, and I came to the same conclusion that when the facilities director and Scott come, that would be the best time to ask those questions.
As long as he's aware, so he's prepared.
Yeah, he must know by now.
Yes, yes.
No, I'm just saying, it's just,
Yeah.
you may be asking about trucks and that type of stuff, but to make sure he can answer those questions.
Okay.
We'll make sure he knows,
Wealth
right?
of
Yeah, he'll
knowledge,
know.
yes.
He is, yeah. Any other business? No?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion and we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
I
Aye. Meeting's adjourned at 7:38 PM. Thank you all.
Love your meetings.